What is the state of the agentic AI market in 2026?
It is very much at the inception, but it has real legs to it. So there is a question of whether it's a hype or reality, and I would probably bet on the side of reality than hype.
You're a huge evangelist of an LLM going to be the next big buyer. As of now, consumers are vetting the marketing data, but you're saying the LLMs are going to be doing that.
It's very much true that nowadays it's the machines that are the ones that are taking over doing the discovery work, and we need to be able to present ourselves just like we would present to the humans to the machines too.
So if someone is not showing up, did they go wrong in the way they indexed? Are there ads coming in the GPT space like ChatGPT or Claude?
That's the model that OpenAI has probably go into. They have a lot of commitment for about like $1.2 trillion commitment.
Wow.
But if you see the revenue stream, it's just about like $24 billion.
Your take on psychophancy, people talk always about hallucination, but there's something called psychophancy, and why do you care so much about it?
Hallucination is where the LLM basically invents an answer and delivers it. Psychophancy is where it agrees vehemently with you. And I will tell you one example. You know that in California there is this lawsuit going against OpenAI where a kid actually committed suicide and used ChatGPT to give him the instructions to do it.
Is there some way we can avoid it? This episode is brought to you by Intrinsic Wealth Management. Intrinsic is a boutique independent wealth management firm based in the San Francisco Bay Area. They build portfolio and financial plan from scratch, tailored entirely to your goals. No proprietary products, no model portfolios, just analytical long-term thinking from partners with deep roots in engineering and finance. If you're looking for a more personalized approach to wealth management, visit intrinsicinvestment.com or book a complimentary consultation via the link in the show notes. Legal disclaimer. The advisors of Intrinsic Wealth Management are investment advisor representatives with High Point Advisor Group LLC, a registered investment advisor. Investment advice offered through High Point Advisor Group LLC, Downers Grove, Illinois. Hello and welcome to another fantastic episode of Ctrl Alt Podcast. This is a place where we bring the cream of technology, and I'm so excited to be interviewing a data guru here. He has spent 25 years, guys, 25 years honing his skills in the area of data. If you are not under a rock, you know that data is the new oil, AI is the new electricity. And where would we be without the data gurus today in Silicon Valley who are creating such amazing AI startups that are running and ruling the enterprise world? I'm here today with Ravi Shankar, the Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer of Denodo. And they are working on the logical data management layer. And why is it important? We'll find out soon. He has also spent his amazing career in Oracle, Simperian, and Informatica. So without further ado, let's bring on Ravi Shankar.
Great to be here, Vida.
Wonderful. So Ravi, tell me, you've spent 25 years in one space, but it has gone through so many technology shifts, platform shifts, and you honed in on data. Why did you choose to stay in this? Silicon Valley is a place where people change jobs every 2 to 3 years, but you kind of have real deep roots in this space, and you've been at Denodo for 11 years, transformed this company into this amazing logical data management system. Tell us why you picked and chose to be in the data space.
Okay, that's a good question to start it off. To me, Vida, that the data layer is the one that has not changed over the years. So I have seen a lot of technology shifts over my 20 to 30 year career across Oracle, Informatica, and now with Denodo, going all the way from databases to data warehouse to data lakes and lake houses now. And also from a technology infrastructure perspective, from client server to cloud and so on. But in all these cases, one thing that remained constant is the business getting the value correct from the data that it has done. So for me at Oracle, it was more about systems of record. So about the databases and the applications and the tools. At Cyperion and Informatica, it was about the intent and getting the value out of the data, like data quality, master data management, and so on. In all these things, I learned that technology is so much only it goes towards like the data. The fundamental component is the architecture. So that's where the logical data management at Denodo comes into play, and it was a natural extension of my change from Oracle to Informatica to here. And this will further change. Like today it is AI, it is also grounded very much in data, and this won't be the final evolution, it will further going to change. But one thing that is going to remain constant is data always supporting all these technologies. So I decided to stay here.
Wonderful. So Ravi, your amazing background from REC Trichy, and then you did your master's in computer science. You're a computer science geek. What got you to move to marketing? I mean, this is a data heavy space, I understand, but marketing is storytelling. Marketing is getting the word out. What attracted you to the UC Berkeley Haas MBA? And you took this course deliberately. What was the turning point?
So you are right. I started off on the engineering side. I worked as a developer for the first 10 years of my life. And it was very interesting for me to understand how to build applications and databases and so on. But eventually my interest transformed into, now we have built it, how do you basically sell it, market it and sell it? And that's where my interest turned toward taking an MBA from Haas. And then I moved into product marketing, then product management, and eventually I settled as a CMO.
Yeah, as a CMO, you have a whole ecosystem to manage here. We'll get to that. It's not just getting the word out, you're managing partners. This is a whole infrastructure for marketing here. So, coming down to your work here, you're a huge evangelist of an LLM going to be the next big buyer. As of now, consumers are vetting the marketing data. They're looking at the slogans, they're looking at the marketing videos, webinars, whatnot on the internet. But you're saying the LLMs are going to be doing that. So this is a huge shift. Most people don't have a grasp of it. Can you explain what your theses, what your publications and talks, what do they suggest?
It's very much true that nowadays it's the machines that are the ones that are taking over doing the discovery work, and we need to be able to present ourselves just like we would present to the humans to the machines too. And in marketing we always say that 70% of the research by a prospective buyer happens much before they even contact the vendor. So today they are doing all that research using the LLMs, and we need to be able to present and market ourselves to the LLMs just like we would market to a human buyer. And to that effect, what we are doing is we are presenting ourselves not very different than what we would do to the humans. The LLMs are looking for three things ultimately. They're looking for information. They don't want marketing kind of slogans. They want consistency, that it is being said the same thing across the different channels. And they're looking for authority, in the sense like, is it coming from a reliable source? So if you take from a Denodo perspective, we are doing that across the different marketing channels, whether it's the website, whether it is the public media, whether it is social media, whether it is our own internal blogs, podcasts, and so on. We are speaking the same language, the same message across all of them. So that is coming across more informational for the LLMs. And the second thing is, it is looking for something that is more authoritative. So we kind of work with the analysts like the Gartner, Forrester, and so on. So that way they are informed of what Denodo does, and then they translate that in their materials, and that informs the LLMs that, hey, Denodo is the one. And ultimately, when the CDO kind of looks up who are the leading vendors in data management or logical data management, and Denodo shows up, then we have done our job.
Wonderful. So if someone is not showing up, did they go wrong in the way they indexed? They got indexed in Google, or is it because LLM pulls it from Google, or is it something else? Like they don't have to worry about Google indexing, or they don't have to worry about as is the marketing, the budget, the way it is being structured. How do you measure this? What are the tools to measure this?
So the tools are evolving. First of all, there are like Google Analytics tools, which we traditionally have used in the past from the search engine optimization perspective. So these tools are evolving to be able to include what we call as the generative engines as well, like the AI related ones like ChatGPT and Claude and so on. So they actually pull the information from that and be able to present that. But there are also native AI tools that are coming in the market that purely focus just on what they call as the GEO or the AEO, which is similar to the SEO. And we have both the tools that we kind of measure. And the way we kind of do this is like there are 2 or 3 different things that we do. First, we actually test the prompt as if the human would actually search for it, like who is the leader in semantic layer or universal semantic layer, and then we test the results. We check if the LLM is actually talking the way we are marketing to it, whether it is like real-time data, contextual information, guardrails and governance. Is it speaking my language that I actually inputted? So that is one way we test it. The other way is we actually look for the customers themselves. Mm-hmm. So the prospective customers would sometimes come to us and say, hey, I looked up in Ask ChatGPT or Claude and it suggested that I talk to Denodo. So we are here. So we know that it fundamentally kind of works from that particular perspective. So it is important that, as I mentioned, to come across as more informational. That is what these chat GPTs are looking for. And then also be more authoritative. That's where we go to the analyst material and input it. And with that, they're able to measure. They have to come up out a little bit more, but they are there where we kind of test it against the persona like CDOs and what kind of words they kind of search for, and we track that intersection.
So are there ads coming in the GPT space like ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity? Do you think they'll be using ads soon for this?
That's the model that OpenAI has probably go into. They have a lot of commitment for about like $1.2 trillion commitment.
Wow.
But if you see the revenue stream, it's just about like $24 billion.
Yeah.
They need to be hitting about $200 to $300 billion in the next couple of years.
Wow.
So subscription is one way. They have about 800 million subscribers. But based on the commitments that they have made to Oracle, for example, the $600 billion commitment that they have for the data centers, they are not meeting those KPIs. That was the story in Wall Street Journal a couple of days back.
Exactly.
So they have to resort to advertisement in order to make up the money. But as you know, there's a big feud going on between Anthropic and OpenAI. Yeah. I don't think Anthropic is going to get into the ads because they clearly criticized these guys are going from that particular perspective, because the ads can influence what kind of an answer is given back to the user, right?
Yeah.
So it is not really authentic AI. Anthropic has done really well on the enterprise side, and I think they're making quite a bit of money. And right now, their valuation is ahead of OpenAI in the $1 trillion. Yeah. So there's very different. So I think OpenAI is already piloting, I think, ads.
Yeah, and you're at the heart of it. You're structuring this logical data management system for authentic marketing validation, and so this is interesting. It's great to hear.
It's a very interesting field. Like every day there is some news about it.
Yeah, wonderful. So that being said, your perspectives across your publications, your talks, and your webinars, you're very dynamic in the industry at the moment, publishing and talking about cutting edge trends. What is the state of the agentic AI market in 2026? What does it look like to Ravi and industry leaders like you who are actually defining marketing, I would say, because what Denodo does and how you're shaping the governance layers and things like that. So really, what is the state of agentic AI marketing in 2026?
It is very much at the inception, but it has real legs to it. So there is a question of whether it's a hype or reality, and I would probably bet on the side of reality than hype. And what I think makes it as a hype is because many of the existing vendors who are on the Gen AI side creating these conversational chatbots and co-pilots are rebranding themselves just as an agentic AI. So agentic AI truly does 3 things, which I call as the acronym PDA. It's not public display of affection, but it is like they perceive, they decide, and they act. So they need a situational context to be able to perceive. They make a decision as to how they want to proceed, and then they will act autonomously. So that is the way they kind of proceed. And in these cases, the fundamental to me is the data. So if they are operating on data that is stale, that has been staged, that is duplicated, and is not in sync with the real-time business, then the answers it comes up with does not feel real, and the human who actually perceives the results thinks at this and goes like, wait, this is not correct. So all this talk about agentic AI is really a hype. But when it is grounded with the real-time data, with the context, and provided within the governance framework, then the results are more authentic, and then it is able to proceed autonomously, taking over a lot of the work that the humans would do, and that makes it more real. So I would bet on more on the real side, because with the right data foundation, agentic AI is here to take off.
So what's the percentage? How many people are still working with chatbots, and how many people have actually transitioned to agents? Is there like, do you have a guess of how people have transitioned to agentic?
I can take a guess based on the industry readings that I have actually done. So it looks like about 70%, 60 to 70% of the people are using chatbots, quite a bit on a conversational aspect. But as the agentic AI is just about like 10% penetration at this particular point.
Wow, so long way to go.
It is.
And Denodo is playing a critical role in enabling that by
true,
structuring
the
data foundation perspective. So Ravi, let's look at a typical enterprise workflow, and some companies trying to build an AI agent. Let's say they're building an AI agent which makes a purchase on a Waymo or something like that. So Waymo has its internal apps, and then they're building an agent which makes a purchase for a person sitting inside the Waymo. So they're building an agent, and they deployed, and it's a huge failure. So they did this amazing boardroom presentation, but when it came to deployment, they failed. Is this a common scenario you come across? And if you see this, what could be the reason? If you see this often, what's going on?
So I don't know whether it is actually going to be a failure in all the cases, but when it fails at the point of not stopping to escalate it to a human in the loop. So quite often what people do is when they design these AI agents, they are so focused on what exactly it should do and how to automate those flows. They do not build the check-ins in terms of something can go wrong at this particular point, and how do you interrupt and escalate it, or interrupt a human being to ask for input and guidance before proceeding further. So it very much fails at that particular point. And that's why it's very important to kind of ground these agents with like real-time data, but at the same time provide the guardrails at which point they have to come back and they have to check with the human. And that needs to be built from the day one before they can get the agents loose.
So tell us about Denodo platform 9.4. Apparently you've created an amazing MCP server and governance and guardrails, and this is like a bottom-up effort. So how does that look? How does something like Denodo 9.4 support the development of a successful agentic AI deployment?
So it is very interesting. And in terms of like, first of all, we talk about the agents need to act in the present. So they need real-time data as the business evolves for them to be able to make an impact.
Yeah.
And Denodo does that in a very real fashion in providing the data as is from the source systems, without having to get the data that is actually staged in a separate system using like batch processing and so on. So what we have done in 9.4 is the ability to integrate both the structured and the unstructured data. So that way we can go against data in any format, from any source or any latency. It could be data in motion, data at rest, it doesn't matter to us. So we are able to provide that unified view of that information now. Now as the AI revolution is all about unstructured data, and we are able to provide that. For that, what we have done is we have included our own Vertex database, so that actually provides the unstructured data in a consumable format for the LLMs in their own language. And we have always had the neutrality with the LLMs. You can change whichever LLMs that you want. So that is something that we have actually provided support across multiple LLMs. And also we have created our own MCP server within the Denodo itself. So that way, the data agents within Denodo now can communicate to any agent that is coming to Denodo asking for the data.
Wow.
And we have created our own agent. So we have a conversational agent that you can look at the data, because ultimately Denodo brings the data from across all these different systems. You can actually go to the conversational agent and you can ask the information, and it will give you the results from all these sources. And also we have released a deep research agent. So if you're asking in-depth questions that require more in-depth analysis, just like the deep research that you see in ChatGPT or Claude and so on, it is able to take a goal, go do further research, and then come back with graphs and charts and notes and be able to explain how exactly it is coming up with it. So it is very interesting for us from that particular perspective. So I think we are at the foundation and the forefront of the data needs for the AI agent, and we believe we are a fundamental need for agentic AI to work.
Wonderful. It would be nice to know what your most favorite use cases with your agentic AI platform deployment and your agent deployment. Is there a specific use case you love with a specific customer you can name, which you want to share?
So the use cases I would talk about are mainly in the real time is related to fraud detection, risk mitigation. There is compliance initiatives. There is customer support or service. So all these are use cases that are very much relevant to my customers, and we have customers across different sectors, like in the banking, in legal, as legal is a very big user of the AI, in healthcare, in manufacturing, and we have a large number of customers that are existing customers that are testing our AI capabilities and deploying them now for the agentic AI side.
Wonderful. And you're a person with so many hot takes. I was just listing, you have a hot take on stale data versus live data, which you talked about. Right. But there is another hot take. You say picking the model is only the second problem. There is a bigger problem before you pick your AI model, which you need to get to. Talk about the bigger problem.
The bigger problem is having the right data foundation. Mm-hmm. So quite often people blame the LLMs when something goes wrong, but ultimately it is the data that is the problem. And the way I I started talking about it as stale data, which is staged and it has been there for a while. And when the LLMs or the agents go to that and then try to get the information, they're acting on information that is yesterday. But the agents need information as of now. The analogy that will give you is that you're sitting in a Waymo and consider it driving just looking at the rear view mirror, right, which is the backward data, right? The data warehouses are good in providing the insights into what happened based on the data from the past, but the agents are looking forward, so you need to be looking through the windshield. So you wouldn't be sitting in a Waymo that is actually looking only at the rear view mirror. So that's why it is very important to have the real-time data provided within the context. So as I mentioned, the agents work with situational awareness. They need to know the context of where the data is and how it is coming through. And then you build the guardrails and the governance, which we talked about. Without that, they can create a train wreck. So with that in foundation, then they can proceed much better. So the LLMs are much better when it is that way.
Wonderful. So Ravi, you're a computer science engineer, data geek basically. It would be nice to know what the stack looks like for you. Sitting in marketing, you have to sell this to the customers, but what is a good practice look like? What should the stack look like when you build a successful AI agent to be deployed? And what are some of the common mistakes people do, or they skip, and it comes back and bites them later, and they're like, we needed to get this to work, we skipped this, and now we're like, okay, what did we do?
Right. Yeah. So in terms of, let's focus what the AI agent needs in order to be successful. It needs the data. It needs the memory to be able to hold that particular information. It needs the semantics. It needs to understand the meaning of the data before it can actually act on it. And it needs the contextual information, which is more than the semantics in terms of the ontologies and so on. And then it needs the workflow in order to execute them. So the stack looks like a mix of what we currently have in terms of like the underlying sources. Then you have the data layer in which you hold the data. You need the metadata that actually describes what this data is about. That is a fundamental component to it. Then you need the security systems in place in order to make sure that they're operating within the guardrails and the governance aspects of it. And then it goes from there in terms of once the agent acts, it is not a single agent that is going to work. It is a swarm of agents that are going to do a bunch of different work.
It's always like that. Yeah. It's always a swarm.
And you need to be able to orchestrate that. Mm-hmm. So the orchestration is now part of the new tech stack, where you need to be able to not only have the agents working, but they need to work in sync. Like, when does one work and when does it hand off to another agent and when does it come back? We don't want what we call in the computer science a race condition where two different threads are running simultaneously without any inputs. We want them all synchronized. So orchestration is a very big aspect in the agentic AI world.
So you kind of grew your career through this stack. You're on the topmost stack, the orchestration layer, so you know your foundation pretty well there. Has the stack changed a whole lot for the data? It's growing, but really.
It is growing, and it takes time to kind of grow those things. So changes come by very, very slow, and that's why there is a dissonance between the business side and the IT side. Because these systems, there's a lot of capex that has actually gone into these systems. They are not good to kind of sunset them and adopt something new all of a sudden. Whereas the business needs to move at the speed of the competition. Otherwise, you're going to be left behind. So the business cannot wait for the IT to re-engineer and retool so that they can be productive. That's where we talk about the logical data layer as an abstraction layer between the business users at the top and the IT systems at the bottom, by which the business users can come to the logical layer and ask for the information, and whether it's business users or these days it could be agents, ask for the information, and the logical data layer provisions the data irrespective of wherever it is underneath. So the IT is free to innovate and change systems at their own pace without having to be tied to the needs of the business. So that way, that abstraction layer is very important, and the logical data layer provides.
That's an extremely high ROI concept you described. If you get this right, it's a very high return on investment. You're saving time, you're live, and then your responses are accurate.
Right. You let the business proceed at the speed it should, and at the same time, you're enabling the IT to move at the speed that they can.
Wonderful. So that being said, this is a pocket question. There is a debate going on system of records needs to stay as they are, and the context people are saying no, context is going to be the core and crux of the matter. Where does Ravi stand? Does he stand in between? Does he side the system of record guys, because that's where you came from at Oracle and Informatica,
right?
And now you're selling it. So are you speaking the language of the context? Where does Ravi sit in this?
In the real world, it's a combination of all of them. Right.
Interesting.
So I would actually talk about. Let me give you the example of the Waymo or the autonomous cars. Right. They actually need to, when they come to a particular stop, they are studying the lights, the cars that are going across, the pedestrians, and all that stuff. So they have to ingest that particular information, which is coming from some authoritative source, and then they need to be able to decipher and decide what they need to do, whether they need to stop, whether they can take a free right turn, and so on. And then they proceed to take that particular information. Yes, context is important. It has always been important, and this is not something new, because if you take a look at from the BI world, the business tools going back to even business objects, it had a BO universe, which was a semantic layer that translated the technical to the business side, providing the context. So context has always been there. Now it is coming to the limelight because of the AI agents. It is just like you go sit in a restaurant, and the server asks you, what do you want? He's asking, what do you want to eat?
Correct.
Right. That is the context. But if you were to go to a clothing store, and if the representative asked, what do you want, what clothes you want to buy? So it is very much in that particular context. So you cannot divorce context from the systems of record. Systems of record provide the authority of where you need to get the data from, and the context provides the meaning from which the AI agents can act. They need both.
Wonderful. Where do you see people who want to pursue a career in the space of data? How do you give them a projection of what this agentic AI and data space is going to be in 2 years from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now? How do we plan for that world? What to expect in that world?
So that world is changing under our feet right now.
Shifting sands,
Yeah, so there is this new concept called the GTM engineers. So GTM stands for go to market. So ideally, I would hire demand generation managers who would work on campaigns, whether it is online campaigns or offline campaigns, events, and so on, and they would put together this particular marketing mix and go about executing them, sourcing the leads, converting them to opportunities, and so on. But now we will be having like a GTM, a go-to-market engineer, who's aware of the marketing flows, but also is adept at the AI side. So they are building these workflows in real time and having agents, revenue agents created that can execute the same kind of function. So that is the reality right now. And in future, I can actually see this go even beyond, where just like a manager is talking to a subordinate, it is all going to be conversational. So you no longer need a keyboard or a mouse.
Wow.
So you don't need to be sitting in front of a computer. You just have your phone, you have your AI agent on it, and you instruct the AI agent what you want to do, and the AI agent goes about doing it and coming back with the results. So the world is going to be very different in about 5 years from now.
Wonderful. And how do the GTM engineers prepare themselves to be in the making? What do they need to do?
One, they need to be adept at all the changing the AI tools and technologies out there. There's a plethora of them. They are coming up into the market on a day basis, like so many of them. So but in order to be successful, there is an intersection of understanding the marketing processes as well as knowing the AI tools. So right now we have people within my own team that are getting tooled up from and upskilled from the use of the AI. We're exploring some new tools and so on to kind of build these kind of processes within the marketing function. But a new GTM engineer will have to come not only from a marketing knowledge perspective, but also very adept at creating these agents and deploying them, testing them, and then delivering the results.
Wow, a marketing person is creating an agent. Wow.
Yeah.
Because creating an agent is so easy now.
Yes. Yes. Ultimately, we all become enabled from that particular perspective.
So we are heading towards a programming career. So structured thinking, structured approach to data is going to be very important.
Yes, and you need to be thinking more in terms of systems than campaigns at this particular point.
How do you mean?
Because that is going to be, what I mean is like, all these tools, how do you incorporate something to automate, right? So right now agents are very good at understanding from your workflow. You have an agent observing you, how you're using the mouse, how you're using the keyboard, what kind of applications you're using, your emails, your CRM, and so on. And they can actually create a workflow just based on that, and they can execute the next day just from that. So you need to be able to think from that particular perspective about how these things are fundamentally AI, and then your processes, marketing processes on top of that, rather than the other way around.
So Ravi, among the many hot takes you've made in the space of AI in your publications and talks, and even today, your take on psychophancy. People talk always about hallucination, but there's something called psychophancy and people are not aware about it. You're the business expert and the domain expert. Educate us. What is psychophancy and why do you care so much about it?
Sure. Psychophancy is more dangerous than hallucination, I would say, and I will explain why that is the case. So hallucination is where the LLM basically invents an answer and delivers it. Psychophancy is where it agrees vehemently with you even if you're wrong. So it is based on your past decisions, your biases, and so on. It might start with something that is very simple in terms of initially it's like you holding on to your kid's bike as they kind of learn the bike. So it could be deployed in a low risk situation where it is coming up with answers, and it feels very much along the lines where you would deliver an answer, so you're in agreement with it. And then you start deploying it slowly into more serious situations or use cases like risk and customer service and so on. It's just like letting go of your kid and they ride the bike by themselves. That is when it starts to amplify a lot of the existing information, wrong information that you have without having to check it. So it amplifies it to the extent where it becomes a serious problem. And I will tell you one example. You know that in California, there is this lawsuit going against OpenAI where a kid actually committed suicide and used ChatGPT to give him the instructions to do it. So this could be a classic example of psychophancy where the ChatGPT did not stop the kid from doing it and ask to even talk to the parents or get out external help. It basically provided the list of steps in order to how to basically kill themselves. So this is an extreme example, but psychophancy could be more dangerous from that particular perspective because it amplifies a lot of the things, because there's a feedback loop. It learns. initially it thinks, okay, so this was fine, and you kind of let it go. But over a period of time, it is going to learn and try to provide it back and back, including your biases and so on. It goes to a very great extreme. So to me, psychophancy can be very dangerous than some occasional hallucination.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for making us aware of this. Most people don't even know the term. Is there some way we can avoid it by using guardrails, or is this more in LLM programming? How does the solution look like?
You have to program the LLMs to be able to challenge you when it doesn't feel right. So it needs to be able to, you need to build the systems in place, and I talk about like the escalation and the guardrails and so on, the interruption that needs to happen, where it comes and presents you like a series of things about, hey, this doesn't seem right. Are you sure? We need to kind of change these things or provide some suggestions. It needs to be able to come back to the human in the loop in order to provide that. What if you're trying to break into a particular system, and the system, it should basically challenge you based on the credentials that you do not have this information, and that it would stop you from doing it. I have actually seen in one of the talk shows where Grok actually did challenge, but after 5 times it gave in and provided access to the user, and this person was able to get access to the data. So there are a lot of failure points and stories like these. So it's very important that we need to stop psychophancy by building those guardrails in place, so that way it comes and checks and challenges the human in the loop before it proceeds.
Wonderful. And two questions pop up. One is about OpenClaw. It's an open source code base. How do you do it there? And how do you secure people who use this outside the enterprise? Of course, enterprise guardrails, people like you are hard at work. You do that. What happens in the open source? And what happens to OpenClaws? They are innovating relentlessly without any specific checks and balances. So what is your take on that?
So this is a very interesting one. I saw Peter Steinberger's TEDx
is that right?
podcast. Yeah. So it was okay. Very interesting how he talked about how he invented this and how it came about. And this is one example. In the 5 months, this has come up like really very strong in terms of being able to create agents under an hour. And I heard that when Alibaba actually rolled it out in China, there was a small gig economy going on where people were actually helping others create an OpenClaw agent and getting charged like $25, $50, and so on. Wow. So it's very interesting how this kind of came about. But the biggest vulnerability in that is the security aspect of it, right? It works without guardrails, and that's where, from an enterprise perspective, we cannot afford it. So that's why you see many of the financial services firms are still not completely on the cloud, because they don't want the data kind of going out. And now they are very much afraid of their data kind of leaking into the LLM space, where it kind of neutralizes their core competency. So it is very important in the enterprise space to be able to build those guardrails, the security, which is very critical. And there are industries that are highly regulated, like healthcare, pharma, and so on. And you need to have like FDA approval in order for certain systems to even function. So yes, the OpenClaw revolutionized creating of the agents much more easily, much more faster. But in the enterprise space, the security needs to be in place for it to function.
Wonderful. So sovereign cloud is a new thing, huh? Sovereign as in not nation-wise, even organization-wise. So it's kind of like a next trend. As in how things go very open, there is another system which counters that with private LLMs and private clouds and things like that, right?
Yeah, so that is coming up. There are a lot of different stories. So we can take 2 different angles over here. One is, so there was this company that I read about, which was based on Anthropic, and they had some violation of the user agreement. And this was a company that had like 60 developers, and Anthropic basically shut down their use. And they were completely locked out. They were not able to use the technology. They had built their entire stack on Anthropic, and then they had on Claude, and the only way for them to interact with the company was using some kind of a Google form. So as these, you can think about all these model providers as an oligopoly, right? There's a few concentrated vendors that hold the power, And if given the situation, like, from what we read from the business perspective, that's a very dangerous way for the consumers. It can raise the prices. We can see some instances like these. So it's very important to have it balanced with the private, with the open source LLMs, okay? And more importantly, from the business users, you need to have a Switzerland be agnostic about the LLM. Today we know the ongoing feud between the Fed and then the Anthropic, right? And it is going to take 6 months for them to dismantle it and go with OpenAI, who has signed the contract right now. So you cannot afford such a long time. So you need to be able to neutral, and that's why at Denodo we actually provide that neutrality, so that way you can switch any LLMs that you want at any whim and fancy to be able to get the results that you need. So this is one angle that is going on. The other one, the sovereign, is more associated with specific countries having the capabilities to do it. Nowadays, this data center is becoming a very big theme, building them, right? And I will give you a magnitude. The amount of investment India is making in the AI space is about $200 billion. And that is the amount of money Microsoft is investing in one data center in Texas.
OMG.
And they are building tons of, many data centers. Wow. So all the countries are now worried about the data being sitting inside the United States, and they want, just like the sovereign clouds where UAE and Saudi Arabia, you cannot move the data. The data centers need to be residing in the country. Same thing with safe harbor with the Europe. So from an AI perspective, sovereign AI is a very big one, and they are looking to make sure that the AI actually functions, operates within their country borders, rather than kind of having that come all the way to the United States and go back. So it's all these are fascinating, very fast developing, and so many things are coming into place. So the important thing I would probably give is make sure that you're able to have that abstraction that I talked about, being able to future-proof your investment wherever you do, so that way it is easy for you to switch rather than getting tied with one particular technology or a vendor.
This is great, great perspective. Denodo is going to be in business for a long time, I can tell. With all these changes, you have to constantly adapt your data strategy. If it's going private or public, and the agents you're building, the permissions they need. So this is fascinating. You're an ocean of knowledge, that's all I can say.
No, it's fascinating for me to follow this one and steer the company in this particular direction. And ultimately, I will end with what I kind of said at the beginning, which is data is one layer of the technology that is not going to change. So today we are going to see AI, agentic AI. Tomorrow it could be something else. But ultimately, as you started by saying, data is the oil and AI is the electricity. The data is going to be fundamental. It's not going away. The business needs to get the value from it, and you need to make sure it doesn't matter whatever technology changes that happen, the data at the end of the day is very sound, and the data foundation is very strong to be able to provide that authoritative data to the business users.
Wonderful.
AI is transforming the enterprise. By the end of 2027, more than 50% of apps will include AI agents. Who's governing them and who's controlling their access? AppViewX is a risk-based agent identity and access platform that accelerates the adoption of AI agents in the enterprise, reduces security exposure, and demonstrates compliance. The platform provides deep observability, governance, and security through intelligent detective, preventive, and corrective controls for AI agents. Stop AI agents from privilege misuse with AppViewX.
So quick rapid fire round before we let you go. Okay. Oracle, Informatica, Denodo. Which of these companies actually taught you how to come up with a one-line marketing pitch?
I would say Informatica. Simply because it helped me kind of understand, take something that is really complex, synthesize it to something that is simple, and then eloquently articulate it very succinctly.
Wonderful. And which one over the other? Is it data lakes or logical data management systems? Which one?
You're getting me into trouble here. So usually they coexist. So among our customers, we have a lot of customers that are using the lake and now the lake house. Along with the Denodo as the enterprise data layer that spans beyond the data lakes into some of the operational systems, providing an enterprise view of the data.
Wonderful. And one old dangerous belief most CMOs are holding on to, you'll be like, guys, let this go. This is gonna make you a relic. So just let it go. What is that belief?
I think most of them think about like AI as something that is a productivity kind of a tool. To me, it is a power shift. And I always tell that you cannot bolt AI onto your existing processes. You need to be fundamentally re-engineer with AI as the core, and then the processes surround that.
Wonderful. And if an AI agent decides whether to escalate to human, what is that trigger which should be designed, should come by design? Yeah.
It should come by design in terms of when the results have a serious business or a human impact. They need to escalate and they need to check and make sure it is correct before they proceed.
Wonderful. So, all right, 10 on 10 there. One last question. I come from the startup and venture capital world. The last 6 years I've been working in that space. What's a startup you would just grab in today's day and age Denodo would invest in or acquire, or what kind of startups and founders are you thinking about?
So mainly, like I would say, in the area of data agent orchestration. So that is an area I think we can definitely do.
Wonderful. On that amazing note, on data being a perennial place or source of business to be in, for all you guys, what a treat it was having this heart-out chat about the trends in Agentic AI and the data infrastructure space. Thank you, Ravi, for the most valuable hour. Love to have you back again.
Thank you, Vida. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.